Hello everyone, welcome back to the sixth video of the Python tutorials for beginners series. In this video, we'll be covering loops. So in our first video, we covered the print hello world program that will print out hello world in the terminal. And if I run the code, you see that it prints out hello world in the terminal. Now let's say I want to print out hello world 100 times in Python. We could do this by copy pasting the print statement 100 times in Python. However, that would be very tedious and that would make our code very long. A much better way to do this is to use the for loop. So the way you write a for loop is to first write out for, which is a reserved keyword in Python, followed by any valid variable name you like. So in this case, I'll be using count as my variable. Next, you need to type out in, which is a reserved keyword in Python. Finally, you need to type out range and then parentheses. So range is an inbuilt function in Python and we'll go through how it works. And then in the parentheses you need to type out 100 as its argument. Finally, we need to write a colon, and remember that in Python indentation is very important, so make sure you have the correct indentation followed by the statement. So what this code does is that it executes the print statement 100 times. If we run the code, you can see that it prints out hello world 100 times. So let's change this number to 10 to make it more manageable, and basically the loop will execute the block of statements below it. So instead of having one statement, we can type in two statements, and I'll type in the string hi. Then let's run the code, and you can see that it has printed out hello world and hi 10 times. So yeah, the block of statements below the loop is executed as many times as you specify within the parentheses. Now let's have a closer look at how the for loop works exactly. So I mentioned that count is a variable, and let's print out the variable. And let's run the code, and you can see what happens here is that count is at first 0, and then each step of the loop, or in computer science terms we use the term iteration. So if so this loop goes through 10 iterations, so in each iteration count is incremented by 1, so you add 1 to count. So you start from 0 and you add 1, then 2, then 3, all the way to 9. So that's what count does. Remember that we start from 0 and you go all the way but not including 10 itself. So let me type out 0 here. So this code does the exact same thing as before, because we again start from 0 and we go all the way but not including 10 itself. So you see that we start from 0 and go all the way to 9. Now let's replace 0 with 3. So in this program we'll start from 3 and we'll go all the way but not including 10 itself. So we'll stop at 9. So you can see that's what happened. So we started from 3 and we went all the way to 10 but not including 10 itself. Finally, we see that count is incremented by 1 in each iteration. What if we want to add 2 to the variable count? We can do this by adding another argument. So we can add in a comma and we'll type in 2, which is our step size. So the arguments in this function, let me just type it out here. So the first argument is start, then followed by stop, and finally the step. So the loop starts at 3, then it'll stop at 10. It'll not include 10 itself, but it'll stop right before 10, and it'll step using the step value here. So it'll step by 2 in each iteration. So let's see what happens if you run the code. You see that it starts from 3, then it adds 2, so you reach 5, then adds 2 again, which goes to 7, then finally to 9. Alright, remember that you can omit the last argument, and by default it'll add by 1. And if you remove one more argument, so you only have one argument, this is only the stop value. Alright, the 10 is assumed to be the stop value, and if you run the code, you can see we get back to starting from 0 and incrementing by 1 all the way to 10, but not including 10 itself. One more thing to show you is that what we can do here is we can start from a higher value like 5, and we can go to 0, and our increment can be -1. And if we run the code, you see that we started from 5, then we -1, so we go 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, but we don't go to 0 because 0 is not included. Make sure all the values here are integers, otherwise you might have some, if you use a float value, your loop might have some imprecision. So that is for loop. So now let's apply this to a real life example. So let's write a program that does 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared all the way to 10 squared. So we are basically taking the sum of squares from 1 to 10. So please pause the video and try to write a program like that, and when you're ready we will do the solution. So let's start on the solution. So first what I want to do is I want to have a variable that contains our result. So I'll name the variable result, and then we'll make it 0. Alright, next we'll use a loop. So for count in range, and we have to start from 1 and go to 10, including 10 itself, right? Because we're adding 10 squared. So we'll start from 1 and then we'll go to 11 because we're going all the way to 11, but not including 11 itself. So we'll stop at 10. And we don't have to edit the step size. Next, we'll take result and we'll make it equal to result plus count square. And finally, we'll print out result itself. So let me explain the code here. So remember that from my previous video that equal is actually an assignment operator. And what happens here is Python evaluates the right side of your expression, or the expression on the right side of your equal sign. So it takes the old value of result and it calculates count squared, and it adds up result and count squared, and it assigns it to result. So we start out at result 0, and in our first iteration count is equal to 1. So what we do is result is equal to 0 and count is equal to 1. So 1 squared is 1 and 0 plus 1 is 1. So since this right side of the expression is evaluated to be 1, what happens is that result is evaluated to be uh, assigned to the value 1. So in our first iteration result is equal to 1. Next what we'll do is in our next iteration count is equal to 2. So 2 squared is 4 and result now is 1. So 1 plus 4 is 5 and our new value for result is 5. In fact, let me print out the result in each iteration, and I'll write down a final keyword to show that this is our final result, and we'll print the code to see exactly how it works. So you can see here that in our first iteration result is 1 because result starts at 0 and 1 squared is 1 and we add 1 to 0, so result is 1. Next, since result is already 1, so this result is 1, and count is 2, so 2 squared is 4, 1 plus 4 is 5, so our new result is 5, and so on until we reach 385, which is our final answer. So this is how we write a for loop. So now let's move on to while loops. So while loops are controlled by a conditional statement. So in our last video we covered the if statement. So if conditional, and then we have a bunch of statements below the if statement. So if this conditional is true, then the statements below are executed. So this is how the if statement works. So the while loop is also quite similar, except that this if this expression is true, then the block of statements below the while loop is executed, and then it'll keep looping, it'll keep repeating until the statement becomes false. Once it becomes false, then we exit the loop. So in this program, what I'm doing here is that I'm declaring a variable I equal to 0. Next, I check if I is less than 8. So in this case, 0 is less than 8. So I start with, so then I execute the statements below. So I print out I, and I is 0. So I get 0. So let me execute the program. So you see that in our first iteration, I is 0. Next, in the next line, in this, what this line does is, let me type out this. So again, remember that the equal sign is an assignment operator. So what happens is that the right side is evaluated first. So I is 0, so 0 plus 1 is 1, and I becomes 1. So this line basically increments I by 1, and a short form for this expression is to use plus equals. So this expression basically increases the value of I by 1. So once I is incremented by 1, then the while loop checks if I, which is now 1, is less than 8. So in this case, 1 is still less than 8, so it executes this block of statement again. So I becomes 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. Then once I becomes 8, 8 is not less than 8. 8 is equal to 8. So when it evaluates 8 is less than 8, it becomes false, and our loop is complete. It's finished. And let me demonstrate this. Print final I, and let's print out the program. So you see that we start at 0, then 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So 7 less than 8 is true, so we print out 7. Then in the next line, I becomes 8. So our final value for I becomes 8, and then it checks if 8 is less than 8, which is false, so it executes the loop. Then we go to the final print statement, which says so I is equal to 8, so you see 8 over here. So that's how a while loop works. Okay, now let's try to apply while loops in a simple program. So let's write a program which will ask for user input, and it'll keep asking for user input until the user types in the number 3. Once the user types in the number 3, we will stop, we'll close the program. All right, so please start working on this problem, and once you're ready, we will continue with the solution. So let's get started. So let's first make a variable I, or let's call it user input, and then we'll declare it to none. So none is a reserved keyword in Python to say that the variable is nothing. All right, we're just declaring the variable so that it exists in the computer memory. Next, let's write a while loop, and let's type in user input not equal to 3. So as long as user input is not equal to 3, our program will keep running. Then we'll type out user input is equal to integer input enter input. So this will be our prompt, and so our input returns a string, and this int function converts the string into an integer. Alright, and we'll print out the user input, and finally we'll print out done once the loop is complete. Alright, so let's run the code here. So now let me type in something else like 78, 94. So you see that it keeps asking for input. Alright, now let's type in a 3, and you can see that after I typed in 3, so user input becomes 3, then it continues with the loop, so it prints out 3 as you can see over here, and then it checks if 3 is not equal to 3. So 3 not equal to 3 is evaluated to be false because 3 is equal to 3. So we exit the loop and we go to the final print statement, which is print done. So we print out done. Alright, so this is while loop, and yeah, this is about it for while loops. So yeah, so I finished the video here. If you liked the video content, then please consider liking and subscribing to this channel, and thank you for watching.